Hello, my name is Faltin Karlsen, and I'm a professor of media studies at a school called Westerdals. And I'm going to talk about something called dark game design patterns. I mainly do research on gaming culture from a qualitative perspective. So I interview players, and I'm also been living inside games as part of my research. And I choose this picture because this is me as a gnome within World of Warcraft. And as you can see, I'm also a professor here. And in this case, to become a professor, you have to do archaeology, and a lot of it, to earn this title. And it's not only because I need to have my gaming world, gaming life and real life aligned, but it's mainly to illustrate that the type of activities you can do within World of Warcraft is really, really huge. And you can pursue a lot of different goals. So for some years, it's been a few years since now, I've done research or become interested in the problematic aspect of gaming. The topic called game addiction. And I wanted to, and this is because World of Warcraft is associated with a lot of problems related to gaming. And I built on my earlier knowledge about this game and the gaming culture, because I've been raiding, I've been living together or played together with hardcore gamers for several years, on and off. And this is not the very original approach. It's a lot of studies within game studies and media studies focusing on the cultural aspect and the social aspects of games. Here are a few examples of ethnographic studies or anthropological studies from game world or online worlds. But when I became interested in the topic of problem gaming and addiction, I became aware of all this huge amount of studies of gambling addiction, because the body of work conducted on game addiction builds largely on gambling addiction and on substance addiction and so forth. And as you can see, or what I'm trying to illustrate here, is the huge difference between gambling and gaming. You have this quite confined game in this slot machine there, and here you have this highly complicated and complex game arena, where you are working more or less like a pilot, having to keep track on all these activities going on, all these numbers flashing on your screen. And there are a few obvious differences between gambling and gaming. Chance is more important in gambling, for instance. Skills are more important in gaming. You have the monetary aspect and the social complexity of online games. You also have the complexity of the game mechanics, and maybe one of the important one is that a gambler is constantly or over time are losing resources because the house is winning, while the player is usually accumulating resources within the game. But despite of these differences, there are also very fascinating similarities, and some of them concerns the design structure of the game. And it was very fascinating to learn about how the game designers construe their game. They're quite cunningly designed to make the player play more, play for longer stretches, for instance. So I just started on a new project where I'm not anymore interested, or not so much interested in the game culture, but I'm trying to do some research on game design. And this will be the topic for the rest of my talk. And this is linked to the temporal aspects of games specifically, because, well, how much time you spend on the game does not equal the level of problems you have. But it sure is very interesting, or a huge factor when you are about how it affects your life. So I'm interested in design, which is influencing the temporal aspects, especially concerning how they influence the daily routines of the player, and also how they can stimulate long-term loyalty. And this is a topic which you can find in a lot of different, or aspects you can find in a lot of different media. The way they schedule television, for instance, is that they're not trying to be nice to you, to have the news on the same time slot every day, or soap operas at the same exact time a week or a day. It is, of course, that you should rearrange your daily routines around the medium. And you also have dramaturgical effects like cliffhangers to stimulate the player to stay after also the commercials and things like that, subscription. All these things are, they can be regarded as, well, they are effective, they heighten the dramatic effect, for instance, for a show. But they also, there are really economical thinking lying behind it. Media companies need to keep on their viewers or users as long as possible. And problem gaming is associated to games like World of Warcraft. And they play a lot of, they spend a lot of more time playing than the average player of other games. So it is obviously something going on with how these games are designed. But I've also I've chosen to widen my focus and not only do research on the design of RPGs, but also other games that are described as exploitative or mindless, and that the player are spending much more time than they really should. So, and I've tried to find any sort of theoretical grasp on this topic, which is not about, which does not come from behaviorism, because behaviorism is really quite reductionist. It only concerns a very, very basic reward systems, and it's only about the relationship between the player and the game. So it's very, very confined and contextless, and that's sort of the idea behind the theory, that it should be possible to apply it in every type of situation. But I wanted to find something that was more specifically targeting games. And I found these dark game design patterns, which is a term coined of a group of researchers which have done some research on games like World of Warcraft and casual games like Farmville, etc. And they have identified three different types of design patterns which they think are problematic or even unethical from the game designers to employ them. And that's monetary dark design, that, for instance, you have to pay something to get to stop doing very tedious chores. You can pay to win, and or pay for stuff within a game or an app, for that matter. The social capital based, that would, for instance, be neighbors in Farmville, where you need to invite your friends, getting them on board so you can get benefits from the games. But the thing I will focus on is the last of these. It's the temporal dark design, where you, by game design, are manipulating the time the user or the player are spending on the game. And this is, I've just started on this research, and I haven't really done any done any large scale studies yet. So I'm very glad if someone has any comments or suggestions for other things I could look at. But for now, this is a pilot where I have studied structural, conducted structural analysis of 3 games. And it's Farmville 2. And in this picture you can see you can actually go fishing. So it's not only about farming. It's also World of Warcraft, where I'm riding some sort of a dragon. And here, the last type of game is a so-called idle game called Clicker Heroes. And I just want to ask this lightning, how many of you have played Farmville and World of Warcraft? Yeah, that's quite a few. And then Clicker Heroes? Oh, 1. Okay, then I think I should explain a bit about this type of games. The genre is quite new, and yeah, I will actually show you a little bit more later, but the main objective of the game is to click on your mobile phone to generate resources. So it's a game in a very, very pure form. But of the 3 temporal aspects, the first is grinding. And I guess since we have so many World of Warcraft players here, grinding is something you are quite familiar with. And according to Segal et al., grinding is a way of coercing the player into needlessly spending time in a game for the sole purpose of extending the game's duration. So this is, of course, the main level, the key mechanism, the leveling structure. You have to spend a lot of time leveling. The first levels are easy, then it becomes more and more. Then you need to spend more and more time to get on the higher levels. So this is a game design which influences the amount of playing. Play by appointment. That's a quite a different type of pattern, and it's more. I think it's more. It's games like Farmville where this was implemented the most aggressively or excessively, sort of. And that the thing is that you have to, for instance, plant something tree, and then it will grow, take several hours before you can water it, and then you can harvest apples or something. And waiting even more time. And the structure of the game is that you start a process, wait for a few hours or even only minutes, then come back and collect the goods. So this is something that mainly influences the routines of the player, because you are invited to log in repeatedly. Withering. That's another type of game which resembles pay by appointment. And withering is a design effect or design pattern where you start a process, but if you don't log in a certain within a certain period of time, you will lose the reward from that activity. And this is sort of not that popular and not that much implemented, but it is, of course, it's part of several games, and I will shortly mention it here as well. So I will explain little bit more in detail. Grinding in Farmville is usually associated with that, with the fact that you have to click and click and click and click to collect stuff and to water plants, things like that. But since the first Farmville, this is Farmville 2, they have implemented a lot of more intricate ways to more long-term goals for the player to pursue. And you can see here you have some sort of a book where you can have you can achieve all these different kinds of medals or rewards if you just grind enough things. And there are quite many of them in the game. So grinding is not exactly only the clicking experience or the clicking activity. It involves more complex sort of game goals. Play by appointment. That's quite common in Farmville. If you log in every day, you will get a sort of a bonus. And here, like here, you can visit your neighbors once a day and get some to help them out and get some small rewards for it. And of course, the withering effect. And I think the name is actually from this design, where you're planting something but you didn't return in time, so it actually just withered. And Farmville has been described as quite cynical. And a game designer called Jonathan Blow, he stated that if you look at a game like Farmville, it's actually no game there. It's just reward structure laid on reward structure laid on reward structure with a hollow center. And also, the vice president for Department of Synga stated that Synga is an analytic company masquerading as a games company. So that's quite... it's not really the highest artistic ambition. And it's very easy to agree that these people are being duped or being exploited somehow. But people love Farmville. At some point in time, I think more than 80 million people played Farmville, and that's 1% of the total human population. So it's a mass phenomena. And some of this can be ascribed to the variety of activities also in this game. For instance, at level 15, you can choose between all these different things to plant, 1,000 cooking recipes, for instance, where you can combine different things, and it's some sort of resource management involved, because it's not trivial how you spend your time. You can spend it quite smart to earn money faster, for instance. And you can also decorate the farm, accumulate resources, and so forth. But it's quite limited, though. You don't have a huge game world to explore. It's basically one screen or a very confined area. So it's quite limited. But people are still loving it, although it's only masquerading as a game, according to. But the thing is, what is it that motivates people to play? And Hilgard and all, they're saying that games can be won because of skill or because of time. A difference that may predict whether a player will be more likely to find competence, satisfaction through blistering challenge, or through patient earning of rewards. So, what for some will seem like a totally futile way of spending your time will for others be very valuable, because they find a pleasure in building up huge piles of resources, or combining resources, or just gaining, leveling slowly, and sort of see your empire expanding slowly due to your work. So it depends on what type of player you are, partly. But I will now highlight one of the aspects of Farmville, and that's play by appointment. And I tried to, when I played it structurally, I tried to play it systematically and logged a few things that may play by appointment design patterns. And as you can see by this table, you can divide them on different time increments, ranging from minutes to days, weeks, longer periods, and the longest long-term goals are sort of or monthly or repeated activity. So again, it's not a game focusing on just the clicking and shorter playing bursts. It is the structural means that the player will start to develop routines on a daily basis, maybe weekly basis, and also on for longer periods. So it has sort of developed since the first implementation of it. And this is sort of what may lead to a loyalty, which a media developer will just love, because you get a predictable income. And in World of Warcraft, now in Farmville, we have all these overlapping goals. And predictability, you know what you get, so you can't sort of, it's very stress-free, we can say, which may induce some sort of loyalty. But also, what is interesting is that a key design feature in Farmville is the lack of resources, which means that usually we play for shorter periods, because you run out of water or fertilizer or anything or something like that. And instead of just waiting in front of the screen, the player will usually log off and log on again after starting some processes. Which means that this game is really valuable playing in short time bursts on the bus, for instance, or at lunch. If we move to World of Warcraft, I've already described the grinding, sort of, and they have implemented, not in the latest expansion pack, but in the expansion pack previous to that, they implemented some sort of follower mechanic, where you can have followers that do missions for you, and they can last from 30 minutes to 2 days or something, and which means that it may be useful for the player to log on just for 3 minutes and gather the resources from a mission and start new ones. This is very similar to how Farmville is designed. But World of Warcraft is mainly about longer periods, or longer stretches of more long-term goals. And you even have a calendar within World of Warcraft where you can see scheduled when different events are happening within the game. So this is a feature which makes it very easy for the player to actually know what's going on and to plan not only his daily activities, but his weekly activities or around the game. I interviewed one player once who said that when he was playing World of Warcraft excessively, which lasted for 2 years or something, he said that his week usually started on Wednesdays, because this was when the raiding instances were reset, where all the bosses was replaced and you can start raiding again. And this is sort of a dream scenario for Blizzard, that the players are actually organizing their week and weekly activities around their game design. So compared to Farmville, you also have all this different type of play-by-appointment design, which are integrated in many different ways. But you see here that the focus is more on weekly and yearly. It's on longer stretches of time, and to a lesser degree about minutes. And this is also then to illustrate the grinding experience, because it's not only about leveling your first character. It's about it's usual to have all these alternative characters and start grinding again and again. A dedicated player will never run out of objectives or things to do. Whereas World of Warcraft is cunningly designed to make you find interesting things to do all the time. There are interestingly, you find very few withering effects in World of Warcraft, but it's some of the quests in the newest expansion does has this design pattern. I won't explain that further. But the thing is that compared to Farmville, the engagement, the design, which influences how and why the player is engaged in World of Warcraft, is very, very complex. We have this reward mechanism that we are now in the more behavioral way of thinking. You have a constant flow of feedback. You have the quest design, which you always have overlapping goals, and you can't really find any natural place to stop playing, because you have always unfinished business, and it's nothing stopping you from playing. You have the leveling structure, which has been described as really exploitative, because it only uses to make the player play for more But it is also is a way to get immersed and know and get knowledge about the game universe. So it of course also has its benefits. You have accumulation of resources, and also all these social aspects, of course. That you compete with other players and cooperate in very, like you said, in very complicated and dedicated teams, which demands a lot of attention from the player and dedication. So all of these goals, they are stimulating long-term loyalty. And this makes it harder to integrate into normal everyday life. So this is also one of the reasons that this game is really associated with problem gaming, because it's really it's actually very hard to keep a normal life if you want to be if you are competitive and trying to be on top of the game community, and to earn all this cultural capital and the status which a lot of people are trying to find. And people are not often not very successful in their everyday life, but they can be a hero within World of Warcraft. So then you become very dedicated. And now, the latest, the last type of game, idle games. This is the game Cookie Clicker, and the objective of this game is to click a cookie to get the cookie. Or you can make a cookie factory to produce cookies for you. Then you get even more cookies, and you can construct more, even larger factories, etc. And as a game, this is really, really rudimentary, of course. But people still love it. And the game I have analyzed, it's called Clicker Heroes. And as you can see, it's not only... this is actually on Steam, which is a more sort of a hardcore part of the player community, and it was on the top 10 list for several months in 2015. So hardcore gamers just love this mindless clicking game. Very fascinating. So what's the reason for that? Here's Cookie Clicker. This is the sort of Christmas edition. And you can see this is the monster, or one of the monsters you have to click to kill. It has a health bar going down. And below here, you're earning money, where you can buy or hire heroes to do the clicking for you. It's not factories, but heroes. And in this case, it's a bit more complicated than it's not only clicking and hiring. You can it's a bit of a it's a strategy also involved, because it's become more difficult to choose how to allocate your resources afterwards or after a while. So it's a lot of dedicated pages and game community which are discussing the optimal way and strategies of actually playing this clicker game, which of course explains partly a part of why it is so attractive also to hardcore gamers. And is this really a game, and what's sort of the attraction of it? And it's a few I will highlight a few aspects. It has a level structure. Just like Farmville and World of Warcraft, you gain levels, and it's sort of but isn't that just hollow? You get them more. You can kill harder monsters, but they're exactly the same as the monsters you started with. Well, obviously not. And grinding is the main game mechanic, which are sort of the most regarded as one of the most simplistic and exploitative game design created, because the only reason, or some say that the only effect you have from grinding is to prolong the time of playing. And in this setting, well, you grind. You can see your leveling rising, but it has, of course, also this Zen effect. You're taking a break and you are clicking. Oh, that was fun. So it's a break in your everyday life, and it's also very interruptible. You can play it for a few seconds and just allocate some resources and go back to work again. So it's sort of grinding in its pure sense can still be quite fulfilling in some way. And also here you don't have the play by appointment design so explicitly as in Farmville and World of Warcraft, but it still stimulates frequent logons. And it has no withering design at all. So yeah, it's very simplistic, but still it's a game. And if you compare the three, you can see this, what I find interesting was this convergence between Farmville and World of Warcraft. They're obviously quite they implemented quite a number of features from each other, trying to capturing different audiences maybe, but also in Farmville they have the retention rate is quite high. It means that people are tiring on the game quite fast, so they are trying to keep the player for longer, implementing long-term loyalty. While World of Warcraft, they're kind of catering to huger parts of the gaming community, and also casual gamers. So people should keep their subscription and just start logging on for short playing sessions if they really don't have that much time playing. But one thing I found interesting is that both Farmville and Clicker Heroes, they are, of course, you tire of them more easily than World of Warcraft because it's not that complex and it don't offer that many things to do. But they also have active design that pushes the player out of the game. You don't have any more resources. Go away. You can't be here. It's useless. So, in an ethical perspective, you can say that okay, Farmville and Clicker Heroes have the moral high ground. They have a design which doesn't hook the player in the same way as World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft is sort of the opposite. It really makes it hard for players to stop playing. And to find a natural way, a natural place to stop playing, which I mentioned earlier. But this is sort of it's very different design in temporally. So this is just a very small study, and I'm starting on a project where I'm going to do more, go into more detail and look at other aspects of games and how these temporal aspects are working in a larger context of the games as well. But I would just like to end this with some general thoughts about what we can do as researchers. For first off, is that temporality does not equal addiction. the temporal aspects, all these temporal design patterns which are used to hold on to the player or create long-term loyalty or to change the routines of the player, they're not necessarily have any adverse effect at all on the player, but they are also part of the picture in problem gaming. So it's a much broader issue. We are living in a culture where we have sort of media everywhere. We are living in a mediated society, and we get notification whenever we are about things happening online in social media, and the different game or media companies are in fierce competition over your attention, and they're always trying to find new ways to find techniques to grab the attention and to hold the attention of the user. So I think we should I think it's important that media scholars and game scholars stop being so apologetic of media companies and be more critical about game design and media design, because even though it doesn't ruin your life, it has a very huge impact on how we socialize, how we live our lives, and sleeping patterns, things like that. It influences our culture immensely. So I think temporal aspects in media design is important. Thanks.
Thank you, Faltin, for a very interesting speak. Have you also been looking at the aesthetics of the games? A lot of these games, they are very colorful and childish in a way in their aesthetics. Is this something you've been looking at?
Well, a lot of gambling research have sort of focused on these aspects, that they are colorful, cheerful, have nice sounds, things like that. And especially Farmville and the casual games, they want to create a very friendly atmosphere. They don't want to drag you down. So yeah, well, I haven't explored it, but that's quite, yeah, people are...
Okay, we'll have one question from the audience before we are taking a break for coffee. So, other questions, please save them for the panel discussion.
All right, yeah, thank you very much for this. This is really interesting, and I agree with you that we need to be critical of game companies and how they design games and how that influences like how we live our lives. But I'm thinking, you were talking about these as being dark design patterns and that they are sort of detrimental and that they don't have the player's best interest in mind. And I'm thinking, well, maybe a thing like grinding. I mean, sure, that's tedious and it makes you invest a lot of time in a game, stuff like that. But that's also something that creates rewards and, you know, nice feelings for the players, and it's frustrating, but through this grinding you can sort of overcome obstacles, and that's maybe one of the parts of the game. Think about a game like Dark Souls that has a lot of grinding, it's super hard, and then you through that grinding you manage some task that's hard. So that's sort of a way of designing that game so it becomes a sort of better game that's integral to the way the game is designed. Same thing this about raid resets in World of Warcraft, for example. Okay, so that's something that will structure players' lives definitely. But without that, I like if there was no reset, like if a raid instance was just immediately reset after you completed it, I guess people who have problems of playing too much, they would just go right back at it again and start playing it once over. So that's also something that sort of regulates, maybe in a positive way, in some sense.
Yeah, I don't think they meant it that way. But yeah, of course, you will be a lot of raiding guilds are running out of content after a few days. So they take some days off before they start again. But more dedicated players can, of course, find a lot of other things to do.
Yeah.
But concerning the ethics of grinding, I think that it's very dependent on context again, because grinding can be very useful for getting acquainted with the game, and it's not necessarily exploitative, but and the claim that they are unethical is from Segal et al. So I'm sort of trying to also to discuss this concept of when can design be unethical, and who should decide whether it's ethical or not. Because if you're looking at only one type of see, for instance, grinding. Oh, they are wasting their life on the game, for instance, because they are grinding and play by appointment and things like that. Well, it's very differently implemented in different games, so it becomes sort of useless to only look at game design. So I think one of the things I'm trying to work on is to look at these discrete design elements in different contexts. I think it's something useful there.
Thank you.
Sorry, enough of that. Do you think the line is talking about driving, about business models? Some game design will use driving as a way of monetizing for.
Yeah.
Whereas other games use Dark or the box model and pay for the game already. And then you had grinding within it, so it's a different utilization. Sorry, I'm making you walk all the way over here.
It won't stick to the.
Sorry.
It won't get to the recordings.
Oh, okay. I don't know if you want it in the recording, but isn't that a more feel what you're talking about, the kind of the vertical line is the business models?
Yeah, it's of course dependent on context really, or would you?
Yeah, that's what I was kind of saying as an answer to Bjorn, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, I think we'll have to take the other questions for the panel discussion.